Hello, Yvonne, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. I'm just arrived in Goose Bay, and so I thought I'd give you a call. There's been a lot of things happening in the last week, and I certainly wanted to discuss a couple of those with you. First of all, the rally they had around the halibut allocation. Obviously, because of the House of Commons being open, I wasn't able to be there. But I think most people in the province will realize that what they've done here in terms of the share allocation is certainly not fair, and it's not proportional in terms of historic quotas and attachments, which is what the government of Canada likes to look at. And what really surprised me is that their justification for the halibut allocations this year and the increases has been based on attachment or adjacency, rather, to the areas. And here I am in Labrador in the past year continuously fighting with DFO and with the minister and her department on turbot and shrimp quotas that are directly adjacent to Labrador waters.
It's maddening.
And not able to move more quota to Labrador based on adjacency because they want to hide behind all of these other options that they use for doing allocations. And now all of a sudden here's turbot being looked at in a different way. So hopefully if there's any good that can come of it, it will be precedent setting. But I can guarantee you that there's no good right now today for many fishermen in my area in the Gulf region, on both sides of the Straits in Labrador and in Newfoundland and in other regions of the province that are dependent upon this quota. I mean, halibut is a good price. It provides a good income for inshore fishers. They get an option to fish it, but it's not fair that this quota is being distributed the way that it is. So,
of course not, and there won't be a precedent because the application of these policies or the guiding principles, LIFO, adjacency, everything else, it's only applied when it suits them. That's it, in a nutshell. Yeah. The precedent is not even as valuable as the 2007 stable sharing plan, which is meaningless. So it's atrocious. We're all on side up with that particular opinion.
Absolutely. I also wanted to talk about the residential schools piece because, as you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, they made their report this week, and they also made specific mention of the situation here in Labrador and certain other schools across Canada that were not part of the original Indian residential school settlement. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the report in Recommendation 29, they did ask that the government deal with this issue. In fact, the Labrador case is a bit more complicated because of our late entry into Confederation in 1949. And before that, there was a long history of both the Moravian and the Grenfell Mission running residential schools. But, those schools were run after Confederation, and many of those who suffered abuse in residential schools happened after Confederation as well.
Yeah.
So they did ask for a resolution for these students of these schools, and they asked the federal government and all other parties, which in this case would include the Moravians, the Grenfell Mission, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, that they recognize the unique situation that exists in Labrador, and that they would look at the apology from the provincial government that was made for Newtac and Hebron. As you know, that was in 2005, and it was on the relocation of many of the Inuit from those communities. And then again in 2006, there was an apology for pre-Confederation Newfoundland and the Chinese head tax as well. So because it happened before Confederation is not a reason not to deal with this issue. And it's unfortunate if, people in Labrador, the survivors of residential schools, would have to go through the courts to get that apology. And, I think that's really sad because we know from the Truth and Reconciliation report that has been done what the suffering has been for many survivors of residential schools. And the people in Labrador were no different. They were absolutely no different. So it should not be any exception here. And I'm going to keep pushing this. And I hope that both the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, the government of Canada, is going to realize that there's an injustice and an unfairness being done to survivors of residential schools in Labrador.
Yeah, there should be no difference. There's some 1,000 survivors from this province, and they won't be included in whatever the process is going forward. My questions here, and I read a fair amount of the report, and I've listened to an awful lot of people speak to it, and I think Justice Sinclair, fabulous, obviously, really top quality person.
Yes.
What's going to happen here? I mean, apologies have been well received, but certainly haven't made any real difference in the underlying sentiment felt by First Nations people in the country. So they talk about royal proclamations to put the relationship back on whatever equal footing is that they're talking about. There's a variety of things here. And then you add in the $1 billion in elapsed spending for social services for Aboriginal communities over the last 5 years. Is there a legitimate solution that can bring us back to some sort of mutual understanding, acknowledgement of the horror that is this black mark on the country? What's going to happen here, Yvonne? I mean, can we really make any legitimate progress on this relationship?
Well, it's like I said yesterday on APTN when I was doing a panel there. I said, you know, what we've seen in this report is real truth, and now is the time for reconciliation. And unless governments, no matter what political party it is, and we're going into a federal election, and I would be calling up on all political parties to honor those recommendations and do good by them. You know, if we don't start working to enact them, we're not going to change things. Now, I know that there's a lot of those recommendations of the 94 that are not entirely within the realm of the federal government either. But the ones that are, there's no reason that we should not action them. And the ones that aren't, we should be taking a lead role in encouraging those people to come forward and act on those recommendations as well. I know our leader has already been out there saying that we accept those recommendations. We're committed to implementing them.
But
and
to do what? To what end goal, though? That's my point. We can hear from Trudeau, Mulcair, anybody else say, yeah, we're going to implement these recommendations. My question, and I think you'd have a working understanding of this, is will it make a difference? What is actually going to be achieved with I'm sorry?
Eddie, it would make a huge difference because in those recommendations, first of all, we're talking about things like reinstating language, reinstating culture. You know, these are things that were taken away from a lot of Indigenous people in this country. When they were in residential schools, they were never allowed to speak their language in many cases. They were never allowed to practice their culture. That's the reason we got away from a lot of these things. And, you know, so that would definitely go a long way. The apology, I guess, I will tell you, last Saturday night I was in Hopedale and I went to visit some elders. 3 of the elders that I sat with had actually been survivors of residential schools. And they told me so many stories about what happened. And they also told me that it wasn't until this issue started to be raised again that they actually started to allow themselves to remember. And when everything came back, you know, they've been in a healing process as well. And it's like they pushed everything back. They pushed it down so they didn't have to remember how they were victimized and abused. And so, you know, I think that many of those recommendations will go a long way in both healing and restoring pride and respect to Indigenous people in this country. But more importantly, it allows other Canadians to understand who our Aboriginal peoples are. And, you know, still today in our schools in Canada, we don't learn the history of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And that's wrong because they have a long history, a very interesting history that has helped make this country what it is today as well. And their suffering as well as their contributions should be known as it is with other people in society.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think all that plays a real role. And I think we have to do whatever it takes to repair some of the damage done. I just wonder what is going to be the end result. and what would be the premium way to get through. The implementation recommendations is good, but we also have to remember that the last wave of apologies, they were well received the day of, and then the next day things went back to where they were. And that's, I think it's an important realization here. We cannot have a symbolic approach to what is a crucial issue for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of First Nations people. I just want to hope that we get it right. And I'm not so sure that no one's convinced me that we're on a track to get it right. And whether or not we have a willing partner in accepting apologies and approaches to reconciliation and to make life better and to have mutual understanding, I don't even know if we have that. So I think it's tricky, and I know you understand what I'm saying. And is there another issue you want to talk about?
Yeah, it is. And before I leave that issue, I'm going to say one other thing, and I hope I'm going to be wrong. But if we don't soon start changing how we deal with Aboriginal people in this country, we're going to find ourselves doing more truth and reconciliation in 20 years from now, because what I'm seeing is a lot of Aboriginal children still being taken out of their homes and out of their communities and placed in foster care, and many families trying to get those kids back, many cultures trying to get their kids back. I think we're going to have another lost society of Aboriginal and Indigenous people in this country who've been removed from what they know and what their culture is. And, you know, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm seeing a lot of it today, and I just don't like the road that we're going down in dealing with some of these issues. And I think there's other ways to do it where we can ensure that people are not disconnected from their culture and who they really are. So I give a heed of caution to governments at this stage, and I've been very cognizant of this for a long time, both in my role as an MHA and now as an MP, because I see it happening. But the other issue I want to talk about is what's happening in Lab West right now.
Okay, very quickly, because I'm running out of time. Go ahead, Lab West.
I talked to you last week about the layoffs at IOC. I will meet with the mining company this week, so hopefully I'll get a better understanding of the direction that they're going in. But in the meantime, there's a terrible situation unfolding in Wabush because the company have filed for creditor protection, Cliffs Resources, for all their Canadian operations. And as a result of it, many workers, past workers, have already received letters that they're going to lose their medical benefits, and the company will no longer be paying into the premiums. So that in itself is going to be a tremendous hardship for some people, and just finding, medical companies that are going to take them on. Some of them can roll over their medical plans, some can't. And some companies have come forward to say if there are people, we're there, contact us. So if we've got a lot of calls at our office, if there's people that need contacts for insurance companies, we want them to call us, and we'll put them in touch with those people that have reached out. But in addition to that, my fear is what will happen with the pensions. And right now what they're saying is that the pensions are protected and that there will be no change in the pension plan while it's under creditor protection.
It's going to be a hard place for government to make a difference there.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a hard place for anyone to make a difference, because one of the problems that we have is that there's an unfunded liability in the pension plan there, and the company still owes over $5 million to the pension fund. And while this is in creditor protection, none of that money will be paid into that pension fund. So right now, what I'm saying is that the pension funds are protected right now. Nothing will happen with them while they're in creditor protection, but as they restructure and reorganize the company and they come out of that, I really want to make sure that this is being watched, and if there's a way to protect these people, we have to find a way to protect them.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of that will fall on the union, and that's going to have to be done in the courts, because there's nothing the government can do. And that's my understanding, because I've seen this come and go at a variety of companies, not just in mining, but a variety of even smaller businesses. So it's an important issue. I hope there's something that people can do, because it's all bad enough to be on the verge of losing your job and the worries that come with all the money that's tied up with your benefits and your pension plan. Yvonne, I've got to go to the break. They're waving me off. I'm late, but I appreciate the conversation and your time.
Absolutely, and but have a look at what happened in Grand Falls on the pension plan and how the government stepped up and then filed for creditor protection themselves, right? So there might be something there. I don't know. I'm just saying we need to follow it closely right now and see what's going to happen here.
We sure do. I appreciate the call, Yvonne. Stay in touch.
All right.
All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yvonne Jones, Liberal Member of Parliament, Labrador.